Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm the homemade foodie. Today we're making broccoli and cheddar soup. We got some carrots, some broccoli, onions, garlic, cheddar cheese. I'm using a homemade chicken broth that I made a couple of days ago. So I'm gonna get everything chopped up. I grated my carrot. I'm gonna chop up this broccoli, get the onions diced up, and also get our garlic chopped up as well. This soup comes together very simple, and it is right in time for this little cold blast that we got here in Houston, so I'm definitely gonna enjoy this. This is something that you can make after work. It literally only takes about 10 minutes to put together and about 20 minutes or so to cook itself. So very easy to get done. So once we get everything chopped up, we'll move over to the stove and get things started. As I mentioned, I did use my homemade chicken broth, but you can use store-bought chicken broth, which is totally fine. One thing you'll notice is that I don't season this soup heavily, and it's because when I make my chicken broth and my chicken stocks once a week, I'm gonna season them to my taste, and that generally is gonna include some granulated garlic, some granulated onion powder, kosher salt, freshly cracked pepper, sometimes turmeric, sometimes fresh ginger. So the broth that I use is so flavorful, so I don't have to add a lot of seasonings. So now that I got all my veggies chopped up, I'm gonna use my little Magic Bullet mini and shred up my cheddar cheese. It's a lot easier to do it this way than to do it by hand. So we'll get all our cheese shredded up. Food processor is one of my best friends. And we're gonna go ahead and get our butter in the pot. Once the butter starts to slowly melt, because we don't want it to become brown butter, so we'll slowly get this melted. Then we'll start adding in our veggies one at a time as well. So once that butter gets nice and frothy, again, we don't want it to brown, we just want it to melt very slowly. I'm gonna add in the onions and get those sweated down. Get everything stirred up together. So now we're gonna go ahead and add in our grated carrots, and we're gonna get that worked into the butter and the onions. I like to let everything cook just for a couple of minutes. Then I'm gonna add in the flour. This is gonna thicken everything up. So I started with 1/3 cup, and I actually went back and added another like tablespoon and a half because it just didn't feel like it was enough. So you'll see flour on my hands and on the spoon later. But soups are just gonna be kind of feel as you go. You know, you don't have to go off a recipe, especially if you're not cooking for a large group. So I just made to where this will be about 3 or 4 servings for myself. So then I added my homemade chicken broth, and I just add this in a little bit at a time so I can get an idea of how much I need. And you really have to play around with the heavy cream and the chicken broth and the cheese to get it down to the consistency of your choice. Broccoli and cheddar soup, some people like it thicker, some people like it thinner, so just play around with it until you find the right consistency for yourself. I ended up adding in about 2.5 cups of chicken stock myself. Then I want to add in my broccoli. We do need to let the broccoli cook, so I added it in, and I'm gonna get that stirred up together with everything else. And you're gonna let your broccoli cook down for about 15 minutes or however long you want it to cook down to the desired texture of your liking. So once I let that cook down a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my cheese. And again, I start in sections with this as well. So I started with most of the cheese, and then I'll get it started in, let it melt, and then I can analyze and determine if I want to add in anything more. So there, I'm adding in a little bit of heavy cream. And throughout this process, I add in a little bit more cheese, a little bit more chicken broth, and a little bit more heavy cream to where I got it to where the consistency was to my liking. So we'll get everything mixed up, and then I am gonna add some seasonings. I added white pepper, paprika, kosher salt, and that was it, because as I mentioned, my homemade chicken broth is already seasoned. So if you're using store-bought, you don't you will add more seasonings than I did, obviously, but taste this as you go as well so that you can see how much seasoning you want to add in. So now my soup is pretty much good to go. I did initially taste it this way and it was delicious. But another thing that you can do is use the immersion blender or just a regular blender, and you can get those veggies a lot smaller, and the consistency of the soup itself will be thicker. And I do have a little clip of that at the end showing you the difference between a chunkier soup, which I'm presenting here, and then at the end of the video you'll see, after I use the immersion blender, the consistency of the soup is a lot different. So I tasted it, and baby, it was delicious. So definitely give it a try, and I will have more recipes for you guys coming soon. So here's that consistency I was telling you about. I let it cook down just a little bit more, and then I used the immersion blender and just got those pieces of broccoli a lot smaller in there. And I like this. So subscribe, follow, and like. Thank you.